A little bit of this, a little bit of that, you zhuzh it around a bit, and bam, Frankenstein's monster. Today I thought it would be cool to talk about and take you along my costume design process. Before we dive in, I would like to mention that 100% of the ad revenue that's generated by this video will be donated to the Costume Industry Coalition, a cause that's very dear to my heart. To help the coalition further, and because we're almost at 8,000 subscribers, we thought we could celebrate this by doing a Hamilton Spencer pattern giveaway. But more about this giveaway later on in the video. First, let me introduce to you Blythe, who is the founder of the Costume Industry Coalition, to tell you what exactly the coalition does and what you can do to help.
In the wake of the pandemic, with the shutdown of live performance, as well as TV film work, everything shut down as of March 12th in our country. And in New York City, there's a community of costume makers, costume experts that all came together to create the Costume Industry Coalition. We now have 55 members, and it includes everyone from the makers to a costume rental house, the last one in New York City that rents costumes for stage and screen. We have specialty vendors that have, certain pieces that are worn on the body for costumes that they're the only ones that provide those things in our city. We have one of the major dry cleaners that takes all of the costumes from Broadway, and overnight they're gonna launder our costumes and make sure they're back on the stage the next day. And as we were continuing to go through the year of 2020, we realized we just need to amplify our story so we didn't get forgotten. Our builders, our makers, we build for Broadway, dance companies, theme parks, cruise ships. Our costumes are seen around the world, and everything has sort of either shut down, postponed, and it certainly is not at the same volume that it was March 12th of 2020. When we got to the end of the year, we actually just did a tally of how much we lost in gross revenue for 2020. And we are currently at about $23 million at a loss. And so in order for us to stay afloat, stay in our spaces, because they're large spaces in New York City where the rent is, most of us are in New York City, so the rent is not exactly cheap. We started the recovery fund in order to help us raise the necessary funds that we could while we were waiting for our government to sort of figure out some hopefully relief packages and other options that we have. We're just going to try to raise some funds. So that's basically who we are and what we're trying to do. And you Costubers like you, we are just amazed at the community that you guys have that is obviously worldwide. Bernadette Banner, when she posted her Hamilton-inspired Spencer jacket, we've sold over 2,300 patterns, printable at home, as you know, easy to print. And we've sold about 2,300 of them, but also people who couldn't sew, they just went to our GoFundMe charity page and they've been giving us donations as well. So we have received donations from around the world because of your community, because of the Costuber community that has just sort of continued to spread the message about who we are, what we do, and how we're all trying to survive.
For those that are new here, or for those who don't know yet, I have worked in the costume industry as a professional for almost 10 years. I have worked as a supply runner, a costume maker, or as a dresser, which means I've been part of the whole process a costume goes through from start to finish. Today I'll be using my graduation collection as the main example and how one particular Broadway show had a huge influence on that. Usually I have two approaches when it comes to choosing my costume design. One of them actually takes hardly any designing from my part, as it is the cosplay approach. Whenever I'm inspired to do a cosplay, it's almost like the costume is sort of challenging me, trying to lure me into the dark side. And I'm like yeah, challenge accepted. There's something about that feeling that's so satisfying when you get it as accurately as possible. Now in the beginning I did a lot of movies and musical cosplays, but in the last few years that has more shifted to doing cosplays of historical fashion plates or museum pieces or portraits. The other approach is what I call Frankensteining it. is where you take certain elements or silhouettes or color schemes or techniques from different sources and you put those together. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, you zhuzh it around a bit and bam, Frankenstein's monster. Now the main reason I use that approach is because, well, let's get this out in the world. I am not that creative. I don't have any ideas of my own. I am a copycat. Yep. There, I said it. Moving on. So let's start from the beginning. I was brought up with theater. A lot of my family members from my mother's side all participated in theater, be it in semi-professional or like community theater, but it's basically in my blood and in my DNA. I tried acting myself once on a Blue Monday in high school, but yeah, I quickly find out that I was more comfortable behind the scenes, says the person with her own YouTube channel. From early on, I was always drawn to costumes, like big, dramatic costumes, historical costumes, like big Broadway costumes, especially those that marry the historical and the fantasies together, like Colleen Atwood or Sandy Powell or Susan Hilferty. The first show I saw on actual Broadway was in 2006. I was already in fashion school and I went to New York with my father and my sister. I was able to score a ticket in the cancellation line for Wicked. If you're not familiar with the story of Wicked, it's set in the world of the Wizard of Oz, but before Dorothy dropped in. And if you're not familiar with the Wizard of Oz, then what are you even doing here? Go and watch it now. I'll wait. But oh my god, what an amazing show was that. I remember during intermission, I tried to find an usher to ask if they took internships there. Not that an usher was the right person to ask anyway, but what did I know? When I got home, I started to do some research to find out about internships. I found out that later that year, that show was going to open on the West End as well, which is a little bit closer to home to me. Now, moving forward to the summer of 2007, when I packed my bags and left for London because I was able to score that internship. From that moment on, it was 24/7 Wicked for me. I consumed that show. I lived, I breathed, I ate it, everything. It felt like it was like the holy land of costume making. I got to see and help with fittings. I was sent on multiple shopping supplies, going over London, buying haberdasheries and fabrics, and then delivering those supplies to the costume makers, getting those costumes from the costume makers a few weeks later, and then maintenance during the show, dressing during the show. I got to see all aspects in that little time frame I was there in London. To me, it felt like they've opened this grandfather clock, where I could see all these individual gears working together to make that clock tick. It was an amazing sight to see. When I got home from my internship, it was time to start on my graduation collection. Now mind you, this was a fashion school. They taught you to be a confection seamstress, not a costume maker. Most of those skills I have learned later on the job, but I was always allowed by my teachers to turn my assignments into theatrical costumes. So the way I usually start a costume design is by dividing it up in the following stages. Origin. What are we making this costume for? Are we doing a show or is this an event? Setting. Is it set in a certain time period? Is there a dress code? Are we going to a ball or a picnic? Inspiration. Find whatever inspires you and work out your design. Materials. Find out what materials you want to use and where the garment will be used. Construction. Figure out how you're going to approach the design. Can you use existing patterns or do you have to invent the wheel first for a certain type of element? Styling. A costume is usually not complete when the garment itself is finished. People sometimes forget that it's all part of the design. So I approach this collection as if it were a stage show, and every stage show needs to have a storyline. Now, this was in a time where the photographer Annie Leibovitz was popping up all over the place. She was doing these amazing haute couture fantasy photo shoots for Vogue magazine. One of those photo shoots was Alice in Wonderland, and that basically established the core of the collection, which had to exist out of 4 outfits. 1 basic pants, 1 basic skirt, 1 with depth in it, and 1 extravagant outfit. So now that we have a storyline, we need to have characters. Obviously we need an Alice. Now I knew that I wanted to have my Alice in a stereotypical blue color. So I used that blue color as the basis of my brainstorm. So what do I associate with blue? Innocence, Virtue, Delicate, Delft's Blue, Porcelain. Queen Elizabeth I, Elizabeth the Golden Age, had just come out with these absolutely amazing costume design by Alexander Bein. Okay, so now we've established the silhouette. Now how can we add to this to make it more youthful and whimsical? Then immediately my mind went to all these absolutely amazing Wicked costumes. One of them was there's a black and white dress that's used in the Asda's ballroom by one of the female ensemble members, which from the front looks like a knee-length circle skirt, but when she turns around, it's sort of cut up like a peplum in the back and has all these beautiful layers sticking out in the back. And then usually the puzzle pieces just click together for me, and I knew that this was going to be my in-depth design. Now what would Alice be without the Mad Hatter? Now, I went for the obvious here, and I used the Mad Hatter for the basic pants design. Obviously, the main feature of the Mad Hatter is the hat, but at that time I had zero hat making skills, so I had to make do with this ugly felt hat from the fancy dress store, but otherwise I would have given him a two top-tiered top hat. So instead I had to lay the focus on the rest of the costume. The other key element of this character is that he's quite mad. So I wanted something that reflected that, but still be sophisticated. Now I remember at school we had this book from Harper's Bazaar that had these beautiful fashion illustrations by the French-Russian artist Echte. There was one particular drawing that caught my eye and immediately screamed Mad Hatter to me. So that coat established the silhouette of this character. By using a velvet fabric and by using a gold jacquard fabric for the waistcoat, I gave it the sophisticated look I wanted, but kept it whimsical. Oh, and then I made him a pair of skinny jeans. Now for the basic skirt design, I wanted to use a character that's not very well known, but is original to the books, which is the Duchess. Now I usually associate Duchesses with being very stern but sophisticated women that radiate authority. And that drew me to this beautiful Emerald City costume design that had this trumpet skirt silhouette. So now that we had that silhouette established, I wanted to make it more whimsical. Now in the show Wicked, there's a character that sort of fits this profile of being stern but sophisticated. And that's Madame Morrible. Now Madame Morrible's main feature of our costumes is this funny looking trained bustle. So I thought, let's combine that bustle with the trumpet skirt. And again, it sort of clicked. Now for the bodice, I can't exactly remember what my inspiration was, with the exception of the sleeves, which were inspired by Satine's grey walking suit from Moulin Rouge. Now for the color palette, I went with pastels. I wanted to have this sweet and innocent look to disguise that she's actually a pretty horrible being. Oh, and I gave her a fun accessory. Now for the last outfit, which is the extravagant design, I wanted to do a ball gown. The obvious choice would be to go for the Queen of Hearts. But again, I was inspired by Wicked. There's this very brief engagement ball scene that has these beautiful ball gowns. And this design is actually a mashup of two of those designs. One of them had these flowy organza strips running vertically down her dress, which sort of reminded me of rose petals. Now what do you get when you turn a rose upside down? A ball gown silhouette. Now for the bodice, I initially planned to cover the underbust with beads as well, and I actually started beading that thing, but it was, as usual, the night before the deadline, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted, so I just gave up. The only thing I added is the asymmetrical balloon skirt that represents the core of the rose. Now putting those four together, this is what that looks like. Looking back 12 years later, there are so many things that I would have done differently with the knowledge I have now. But I guess you would call that character development. Now there's one more costume that I want to show you that got inspired by a Broadway show. For a nautical steampunk act at a fantasy fair, I had to design a nautical steampunk outfit. And again, this costume got Frankensteined. I found inspiration in Disney's The Little Mermaid musical with costumes designed by Tatiana Naginova. I found Ursula's tentacles so fascinating that I just had to reproduce them. Like, had to. Now to this day, I'm not 100% sure on how they actually did it, but the way I did it was I made these teardrop shapes that I scaled down. So I had them going from big to small. And then alternately, I sewed them together either vertically or horizontally. And that created this harmonica effect. Every teardrop had a big eyelet in them that had a steel boning going through that I that then in turn was attached to my corset with hardware. The skirt was actually inspired by the animated version of Disney's The Little Mermaid, when Ariel gets washed up on shore but naked, and she dresses in tarps and sails that she finds on the beach. Now, the leather corset was inspired by a red carpet look from a Dutch celebrity, and the jacket was inspired by old Navy uniforms. Nowadays my costume inspiration has shifted a little bit and I hardly do any cosplays anymore, although I do have a Fennec Shand from The Mandalorian on my bucket list. But nowadays it's mostly historical costumes that I do. Sometimes I use the cosplay approach and I try to recreate a painting or a fashion plate as accurately as possible. But most of the time I still Frankenstein it, like I did with this dress. This dress is an original piece from 1872 from the Kent State University Museum. As you can see, I fairly copied the overall design, with the exception of the color palette. I did the same with the day bodice, which I also based on an existing garment that once was auctioned off on eBay. As I had quite an amount left of the blue silk, I made an elliptical skirt to go with the bodice, which I based on a fashion plate of that time period. And I think that basically covers my design process. We are so close to hitting 8,000 subscribers, so we thought that that would be the perfect opportunity to celebrate and to help the coalition even further. We're going to give away 2 PDF patterns from the Hamilton Spencer jacket that were especially designed for the coalition by Paul Tazewell, the costume designer of Hamilton. And just to be clear, this giveaway is not sponsored. These patterns will be purchased and gifted by me, so all proceeds of these patterns will go to the coalition. To enter the giveaway, all you have to do is tell us in the comment section down below what show or movie has inspired you in your costume making. And then once we hit that 8,000 subscriber milestone, we will draw 2 random winners from the comment section. The winners will be announced in the next video after we've hit that 8,000 subscriber milestone. You can find all information about the giveaway in the description down below. As mentioned in the beginning of this video, all ad revenue generated by this video will be donated to the Costume Industry Coalition. If you want to know more about the coalition and what you can do to help, please visit costumeindustrycoalition.com. Now you can also help by giving this ad revenue a boost by liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing this video. And that's it for today's video. I hope you'd like to see a little bit of my design process and what inspires me to make my costumes. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye! Ow. Pins and needles. I need blood in my feet. For a nautical themed steampunk act You can do it, you can do it, almost there. The winners will be announced in the next video once we've hit that 8,000 subscribers. And that's it for today's video. I hope you liked to see my costume thing.